Hey guys, Aaron here. Today we're going to be replacing the front shocks on a Chevy Silverado years 2014 through 2018. Now if you have a GMC Sierra, a Yukon, a Chevy Suburban, or Chevy Tahoe, these procedures are going to be the same as long as you have the non-electric magnetic ride control system, which as you can see we don't. This particular truck has about 110,000 miles and it's pretty much due for new shocks. We're getting some bouncing up and down, and on the passenger side, which we'll see in a little bit, we're actually getting some leaky oil from the shock absorber itself. Now what we're going to be installing today is just a replacement strut. We're going to have to reuse the same spring perches and mounts and everything like that, and I'll go over that in a little bit. But Bilstein is actually a really good manufacturer of these struts. I would stay away from any cheap, Monroe or any cheaply made auto parts store replacement strut for these trucks. Some other good manufacturers that I recommend are KYB and Eibach. They seem to make good quality struts. I'll actually include a link in the description of where you can purchase these at, and also include how much they are. Now the first step is going to be to remove the 3 18mm nuts that are on top of the spring perch right here. You could there's two ways to get to them. You could either bend back the liner right here and get your socket or wrench on these nuts, or you could do what I like to do, is to go through the engine bay. And as you can see here, we have great access to our bolts. Just simply take this connector right here, it hugs over this stud, lift up and kind of push it out of the way along with this loop right here. That way we can get to the bolts perfectly. Next step is going to be to remove the two lower bolts that hold the strut to the lower control arm using our 15mm socket. Now that we got all the hardware out in between the strut and the lower control arm, last thing to do is to remove the strut. Now this particular strut has a leveling spacer on top of it, which is making it a little more difficult. If that's your case, go ahead and take a pry bar and simply put it in between the lower control arm and the strut and lift up. That'll give you a little bit of clearance. Also, one other thing, your sway bar link, you can actually loosen this nut up and it'll give you a little more clearance. The lower control arm will drop down a couple inches, making the job a little bit easier. Now that we have both shock assemblies out of the vehicle, it's time to replace the inner strut, which is located right here. Now there are two ways to do this, and both ways can be dangerous because we're taking a lot of torque and a lot of tension to compress these springs in order to remove the strut mount. Now the first way, you can go down to any auto parts store and purchase a rental spring compressor kit like this. However, the last time I did the same exact job with this kit, it was pretty difficult to remove these springs, so I'm actually going to be using a wall type spring compressor tool that's a lot safer. So if you don't feel comfortable doing this, take these struts down to your local mechanic and they can actually swap the struts for you. Chances are, if you don't have the right tools or the confidence to do it, it's always a safer option to have somebody else who can do it the proper way. Once our spring is compressed, all we have to do is remove this middle nut and our old strut will fall out. Go ahead and keep this piece inside the spring. We're going to need it for our new strut, and then all is left to do is install our new strut. These wall mounted units are really nice because they take all of the weight of the spring and just hold it in place. That way we can pretty much guide the new strut and install it correctly. After you have everything lined up, all you really have to do is tighten down the 18mm nut that's on top of the strut. Now we have our new Bilstein struts installed, and now it's time to go ahead and throw these back into the vehicle. Now what I like to do first is just grab a nut and secure the top portion first. That way the strut doesn't fall down when we're working to put the bottom in. And what you're going to notice at the bottom of the strut is that the strut mount and the lower control arm holes don't line up, and that's okay. You could either take some large channel locks like this or your hands, and you can simply turn the lower part of the strut to line up with the control arm. A little bit tough, but if you get a good grip, you can get on there pretty good. Now the last thing before we throw the hardware on the bottom is to take our old little nuts right here and put them on the new struts. Got to swap those over, and then we can put our bolts in. Now the last thing to do is to put the 3 bolts back on the top of the strut and torque these down. And of course, once that's done, don't forget to put your wiring harness back in its place. The last thing to do is go ahead and of course get your vehicle aligned. So that pretty much wraps it up. I hope this video has helped you out. If it has, please like and subscribe. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave something in the comment section. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you next time.